thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck and Rico Lamitte, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Oh, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Happy hump day. Today is Wednesday, April 17th, and today is National Banana Day.
Oh, yeah, Jason.
Right? Shout out to Golden State Banana out there. It's also National Crawfish Day. Oh, Yarrow, it's your day. It's National Cheeseball Day. It's also National Haiku Poetry Day.
That's my day right there.
I bet. And National Ellis Island Family History Day.
That's actually my day too.
Mm-hmm.
If you ain't black. That's pretty much history goes back. It goes to Ellis Island if you're black. Just saying.
Oh boy. Well, thank you for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above on your screen to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on our very own website at www.highat9news.com. But kicking it off first, that's right, we have the dope dad himself, Mr. Rico Lamitte, the happy cabbage specialist who is constantly doing the running man when he's on phone with clients. That's right. It is the dope dad himself, Mr. Rico Lamitte.
Did I get applause?
No, I told you, bro. No, Adam's out for 2 weeks, bro.
Ellis Island, no applause, no cheeseball.
No.
Nada.
Damn,
You're on the NC list, bro.
I can't get nothing.
There you go. There you go.
Do I not entertain you?
Oh, boy.
Are you not
entertained?
All right, so.
Want the short answer?
There you go. Much better. All right, y'all. So it looks like a real one in the industry is moving on to new things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so anybody who's been in cannabis for any notable amount of time will tell you how much it's changed since they first got in, whether it's above ground or below ground, how rapidly it continues to change. But one thing that people who have been in for a while will notice is where the real ones are, who the real ones are, and what defines the real ones in this game. Right. So anybody who has gotten the opportunity to meet, to collaborate with Nancy Whiteman from Wana Brands will tell you how extraordinarily awesome of a person she is. Right. And so she is moving on from Wana Brands today. She's been in for 14 years, and it's been all over the news of what she's done to bring that brand out of her kitchen 14 years ago to when they got bought out by Canopy Growth about for like $300 million a couple years ago. And all of her philanthropy work, how she's done stuff to help communities of color, how she's done stuff to help women in the industry. Like the list is nearly endless. I personally got a chance to work with her right before COVID. Her and Jamie Pearson, we were putting some stuff together that unfortunately did not get to come to fruition, but she's just a fantastic person. So the one bio that I did pull of her work was from Green Market Report. Just go through that. So today, Wana Brands, Mountain High Products LLC, Wana Wellness LLC, and the SEMA Group announced that Whiteman would be stepping down from her day-to-day role at the end of May to pursue philanthropic activities and other interests. The transition has been in the works for a while, and after almost 14 years since co-founding Wana in 2010, she'll be stepping down from her day-to-day role as their CEO. And she said in a statement, "I'm thrilled that Joe Hodes will be taking my place at the helm at Wana. While it's never been easy as a founder to step away from the company that they started, I've got full confidence that Joe and our Wana leadership team are well positioned to continue Wana's growth." She went on to say, "I'm looking forward to being able to devote more time to the Wana Brands Foundation." I know a lot of people who have already benefited from the Wana Brands Foundation, and big shout out to Nancy for doing what she's doing over there. Well, we've already made almost $5 million in donations to over 150 organizations. She said that she won't be leaving the company completely. She will remain as a member of the board of managers leading Canopy USA, and she will also play an active role in the Wana Brands Foundation, which she created in 2022 and is one of the largest cannabis-related philanthropy funds to date. Hodes is Wana's current CMO, a 4-year veteran of the company, a 12-year veteran in the legalized industry. And she said, "To say it's equal parts exciting and intimidating to fill some of the largest shoes in cannabis would be a gross understatement. I'm so honored and privileged to have being part of Wana's history, learning from Nancy and being inculcated in her vision, now to be tapped to take the vision into the future," is what Hodes said. Unfortunately for Nancy, I have her cell phone number in my favorites. So yeah, I don't want to like wax poetic like on all the good stuff that we were doing like pre-COVID. I was just really hyped to see that Wana Brands, and I think it was an extract. I can't remember the extract brand that took advantage of Canopy and them trying
Jetty.
to get into the U.S. Who was it? Yeah, it was Jetty. Yeah, Jetty Extracts.
Out of NorCal. Thank you very much.
That was like one of the biggest come ups I have ever seen, and I remember when that happened. I gave Nancy a call, just congratulate her on that. They got basically a $300 million blank check to do whatever the fuck they wanted to do, because Canopy was trying to get into the U.S. and this before Canadian cannabis started crashing. So and it was the stipulation in it is they would be able to take over Wana and everything should cannabis become legal in the U.S. within the next 2 years. Guess what? 3 years passed, and they got to keep the money. And then everybody benefited from all of that money, and they're going to continue to benefit from that money that came over because of Nancy's vision. So big ups to Nancy Whiteman and everything she did at Wana. I'm excited to see how she continues to influence people from coast to coast in the industry. And yeah, just interested in hearing what everybody else has to say about Nancy Whiteman. If you've met her, if you have any experience with her, like she's an awesome lady. And reach out. Show love. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High at 9 News. What say you, team? You guys ever get a chance to meet her or work with Nancy?
Yeah, for sure. I remember back in the day in Colorado, one of my very first ventures in cannabis was brokering wholesale transactions. You know, whether it was flower, trim, whatever. And Nancy and her 2 sons that worked with her used to buy pounds of trim from me. So I remember seeing their facility very early on and dealing with them very early on. So I guess I just gotta say it's really nice to see people that have been doing it right from the very beginning be successful, have financial success, and be able to move on in a good way. You know, I'm sure we can all agree that over the past 10-20 years, the number of people that are actually good operators don't always survive. So it's good to see you know, one of the good guys win. Yeah,
and not just one of the good guys, but she's like awesome at business too. She had her shit together, and she got it. Like when she came out, I had the honor of escorting her and her team at the High Times Women in Weed event, like I'll say 2019, and she was asking me about like the California market, and they were talking about just consulting opportunities because doing a lot of consulting with brands back then. The first thing that she asked me is something that hardly anybody from outside of cannabis or from mainstream business ever asks, is like, how can I first connect with the streets? And to hear that from like a massive brand and everything like that, I was like, this lady gets it. That was like my first conversation with her. And I really feel like that's the missing piece that everybody leaves out, especially like MSO operations when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to brands and stuff like that. They want to expand, they want to get in these big box stores, but that component that they always miss is like, how can you connect with the existing community? Because cannabis is different. And the fact that she understood that like from the jump, I was like, yo, she's special. And just continue that praise of her, everything I've seen her do since.
It's difficult. It's difficult to survive as a brand. I mean, if you look back at who was operating on the first day of adult use sales, January 1st, 2014 or 2014 in Colorado.
It wasn't 2012.
Which brands were out there? So the law passed in November 2012.
Okay.
It was signed into law December 2012, and then they had 1 year to basically draft the adult use regulation. So January 1st, 2014 was the first day of adult use sales.
Got it.
But yeah, so if you look back at the brands that were operating then, and you see who's still surviving, a lot of those OG brands are gone. So like I said, it's cool, especially as a Colorado boy. It's cool to see a Colorado brand survive, go into multiple states successfully, and wishing all the best to Nancy and to Wana as they move forward.
Yep.
Go for it, Yarrow.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talk about how nobody makes money in cannabis. This amazing woman is walking away with a net worth of $250 million. Good on her. She went to Cornell. After that, she got her MBA. She stayed in her lane for 14 or 15 years. She's rounding 65. What a fantastic way to retire. We talk about companies that don't create value but extract value. This company created value and a footprint, and then did a big deal with Canada, and where Canada took a lot of the uncertainty and the risk involved in this pending federal legalization that everybody has wanted to think is just a couple years out. I have said for more than a couple years that the talking point of federal legalization being a couple years out is a tired talking point that you will hear at cocktail conversation amongst policy circles, but that we've been saying that for a really, really long time. And the Canadians bet on that. And so far that hasn't manifested, but she did a really good job negotiating a deal. And I love that she's going to spend her time doing philanthropic stuff. I wasn't sure, Rico, if it was the color of your skin that made you pronounce her last name as Whiteman instead of Whitman. But like either way, I'm here to say it's okay however we pronounce it.
That's cute.
I thank you. I'm trying.
E in there.
It does. I'm totally messing with you. There's an E.
I'm pretty sure it is Whiteman.
It is. It totally is. But
should I call white men now? Should I call them Whitman?
You should call them Nancy's instead of Karen's. It is National Cheeseball Day, and it's my job to be the cheese on the charcuterie platter that is High at 9 News. I'm super happy for her, and I'm excited because anytime we see people win and we celebrate that win, it reminds us of the opportunity within this industry, within this country, and within all of us. If we grind our ass off, we do something well, and we put a lot of time on task.
And you act with compassion. I think that's the biggest thing. Like with her, and that's what this industry is all about, man. From the beginning, from the jump, from the roots of this shit, it's medicine, and it helps people, and it cultivates relationships too, man. And I'm just happy to see some real ones get in that W column, man.
100%.
Big W's. Congratulations, Nancy. This is great. We're gonna roll into a commercial, and we are gonna be right back.
Oh man, that was weird. Hey, you America. Do I look like Sean Connery? Good morning, America. Saman Razani coming to you live from sunny Los Angeles, California with the one and only highest host, Mr. Jason Beck, smoking on the best weed in the world. Did you know that we have an audio-only version of our podcast? You can find it on Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. No excuses in 2024. If you haven't checked us out, check it out now. And also, check out what the Prophet's doing in 2024.
Y'all know who it is up next. It's the incredible shrinking man. He's known for smoking the best weed in the world and being the highest Republican in every room that he walks into. The High at 9 head honcho, Jason Beck.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cute. You got the sound effects going, Rico. Good job. Congratulations. Oh, man, you guys. Man, oh, man, oh, man. Happy hump day. New Hampshire governor won't sign a marijuana legalization bill, you guys. New Hampshire's Republican Governor Chris Sununu will not sign into law a bill to legalize adult use cannabis that was passed last week by the State House of Representatives, according to media reports. The House passed the bill for a required second time on Thursday, just over a week after the measure's original approval. The measure HB 1633 was introduced at the beginning of the year by Republican State Representative Erica Lalon. The bill was approved in the House on April 11th by a vote of 239 to 136, and under New Hampshire state law, legislation with financial elements must be passed twice. The first time the marijuana legalization measure was up for a vote in February, the chamber advanced that bill by a vote of 239 to 14. If passed by the state Senate and signed into law by Republican Governor Chris Sununu, the bill would legalize marijuana for adults aged 21 and older who would be permitted to possess up to 4 ounces of weed. The measure also legalizes the commercial cannabis production and sales under a tightly regulated model overseen by the New Hampshire Liquor Commission, and the bill only allows for 15 retail cannabis dispensaries to operate statewide to serve a population of nearly 1.4 million people. The measure, however, does not conform to conditions set by Sununu. Last year, the governor said he would sign a tightly regulated marijuana legislation bill, changing his stance on the issue after years of opposition, he says. And in a quote, Governor Sununu has been crystal clear about the framework needed for a legalization bill to earn his support, focusing on harm reduction and keeping it out of kids' hands. His office said in a statement to reporters after the House passed the marijuana bill on Thursday, according to a report from Marijuana Moment, in quotes, the legislation passed today doesn't get us there, but the governor looks forward to working with the Senate to see if we can get it done. The governor is seeking a tightly regulated adult use marijuana program with retail outlets restricted to state-supervised franchises, and the model is unpopular with many House lawmakers, however, who feel such close involvement would subject the state to legal risks. Leon says she has approached Sununu's office several times to confer on the legislation, and the governor's office has communicated with other lawmakers about the subject, but his office has not responded to Leon's request for collaboration. In quotes, that the bill that passed the House reflects the governor's guidelines as I understand them. Until his last-minute embrace of a franchise model, Leland told Marijuana Moment on Friday, I made dozens of attempts to meet with the governor and his staff to get into the policy details, but the best meeting I achieved was a walk and talk with him through the halls of the Capitol. The bill now goes to the Senate, where it could be amended to align with the governor's conditions for legalizing cannabis, but Leland says that such a bill may not find the support it needs for success in the House. In quotes, there is a real danger that the House may not accept what comes back from the Senate, Leland added. So I look forward to talking with my colleagues to ensure that anything we receive can pass without a committee of conference, she says. Well. I find it extremely interesting that Governor Sununu, being a Republican, especially from New Hampshire, where their motto is live free or die, that he is advocating for larger government, which is a big Republican talking point. And I think he needs to check himself on this a little bit. And I don't understand what his reasoning is for why he would want a state-run situation. But nonetheless, I'm going to digress and see what you guys have to say. And this is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do y'all think?
This is Deja Vu, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Virginia, man.
I love that Jason is catching on to the fact that Republicans don't actually believe in small government.
That's not true. That's just this Republican.
Oh, and it's Glenn.
Oh, but it's not only that one. Come on.
Glenn Youngkin
I can't tell you how many times.
You can't even say it with a straight face, Jason.
I just did.
I can't tell you how many times I sit down with
and he tried to, with both parties, the Republicans. They had both chambers, excuse me. They couldn't push anything forward either because the governor didn't agree with the model that the House and the Senate agreed on, and it's the same exact situation. Looks like it's going down in New Hampshire. He wants his government-run franchise model. Nobody wants that shit.
Yeah,
not gonna make money off.
Even the government doesn't want it.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah, we don't.
So,
This is the common theme. I mean, this is not the only time that I've heard Republicans who traditionally pissed and moaned about overmanagement, over taxes, over regulation of industry. When it's something they don't want to happen, they do the exact same thing that the Democrats have done to overtax and overregulate everything. They're disingenuous in what they're saying. They don't want cannabis to be legal, so they're going to drag their feet and take every micro step they can, make it as hard as they can to get this to work. And the trap market's going, hey, just keep doing what you're doing because we're making bank.
I thought that was the most ironic part that was mentioned in the article, right? We're talking about a system in which you have a cap of 15 government-run dispensaries, and then on the flip side, they're saying that his priority for cannabis is reducing access for underage consumers, right? Like when are people going to realize that the more legal access points there are, the less dealers there are, which means the less likely it is for an underage person to have access to cannabis.
That right there.
Yep.
I was gonna just say real quickly, Jason.
Yeah.
We give a big shout out to the Suitor music coming through with the first.
Oh, yes. Big thank you. Thank you for that super chat. The Suitor music says deschedule or bust and compassion for the win. I think we can all agree with that.
It's not so new. It's so old, and it's nothing revolutionary, and it's not going to move the needle. And government-run dispensaries, it doesn't make any sense. It is big government, and I do agree with Jason that for the most part, Republicans are devotees of less government. The problem with the less government at all costs mindset is instead of measuring outcomes, they just measure the size of bureaucracy, and a lot of important functions of government are eviscerated and eliminated because of this desire to have government be so small. There are things that government does well. I don't think the Panama Canal would have been done if it hadn't have been for government. I don't think we'd have our nation's freeway systems if it wasn't for government.
We wouldn't have the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, thank you. And so I think that one of the failings of the talking point that is echo chambered in the Republican Party and on the right is this notion that all government is bad and that big government is bad. It's about accomplishing big things. And if that can be done better with government, then we should say, thank you, government, for doing what can't be done without you. That does not apply to a dispensary. That's all.
Yeah, I just don't.
I would even say, what does it mean to be a Republican these days? They don't stick to what they say.
We can go over that on another show, Rico.
I'm asking you, Jason. What does it mean to be a Republican?
It's so complicated.
It's not about keeping government.
You're about freedom,
about
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and maintaining.
About giving half of a city's budget to the police force.
I would argue.
Well, when it's riddled with crime, you're going to need to do that.
Now it's just all about power. That's all they want is to be in control.
Look, we can't say that that's a single party situation, right? I mean, look what the Democrats did when they hijacked Bernie and put in Hillary for the candidacy. So there's culpability on both sides, and I think if we were going to distinguish what problems are more prevalent on the right side of the aisle, it wouldn't be the notion that power is corrupting.
And I would have argued 10 years ago that cannabis legalization in the future is going to be right-leaning libertarian thing, and we just have not.
It should have
seen that.
always been.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree with that
too. It's about personal liberty and,
Your freedom
and
of
small
choice.
government, right? So how is it not a core Republican value?
I'll tell you right now, George Washington and our founding fathers would be rolling over in their graves right now if they knew that the federal government was prosecuting people over a plant that they choose
Let
to
George
consume.
Washington.
Yeah, all their asses would be in jail.
And ass like George Washington can eat all the.
You're such a hater sometimes.
Demonetized.
You're
But,
such a hater sometimes.
Fuck George Washington.
Oh,
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Read about George Washington at the end of his life and what he was doing with his slaves. That's all I got to say.
Oh,
Read about where his teeth came from.
oh God.
Right. Yeah, which slave he got his teeth from.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jeez,
Real talk.
Please, you guys. Always trying to make
Just
the
saying.
bad the enemy of
Real
the good.
history.
All right, we're going to keep this train
And he
rolling.
wasn't a Republican either. Wasn't he a Whig?
There weren't the Republicans.
Republicans
There
back
were
then.
It was actually before the
Republicans back
Whigs,
then.
too.
It was before, yeah, that wasn't the situation.
Please don't take digs at Whigs, okay? They're not here to defend themselves.
Back then, they were more in tune with the one-party system, and they did believe that a two-party system would rip the country apart. And
That was his second farewell address, right? He warned that the federal
Mm-hmm.
system would have eventually inherently lead to two parties, which would lead to single issue voters.
Yep. And speaking of that, someone told me a funny, interesting rabbit hole one time the other day, and I thought it was extremely interesting, Rico, and I think you will find it very, very interesting.
I love rabbit holes.
Yeah, they said here's your conspiracy theory. Are you ready? They said ever since the Civil War, the Democrats have been hell-bent on destroying America, even if it took 150 years to do so.
Was that a fortune cookie or some propaganda at an event that you went to?
You can take it however you want it.
We want to examine this a little more closely, Jason.
I mean, look, Jason,
let's look at the values of each of those parties in following the Civil War.
But there's some truth in that. It's just that somebody mutated it to make it partisan. I think what we would be more accurate in saying is that people in a position of power for many years in many countries and in many societies have had a vested interest in keeping large swaths of the population under-resourced, under-opportunityed, and to gaslight people into not understanding what's being done to them. And that has to do with corruption and power.
Yep. And on that, we're going to roll right into corruption and power with Mr. Dale Schafer. Oh, yeah, he's an attorney at law, and at one point in time did some time for a cannabis crime. And, oh, man, I can't wait to hear what you got to talk about today, Dale. It is none other than the founder of our model law practice, Mr. Dale Schafer.
Good morning, everybody, or if you're on the East Coast, good afternoon. My story today involves a group that I'm going to call Canopy
Culture
Cannabis.
Culture
Sorry,
Cannabis.
geez.
Yeah.
These C's wrong.
Canopy was the first story.
Yeah. This is a lawsuit that was filed, I think, on Friday of last week in the federal court in Los Angeles by three investors who claim they dropped over $9 million into an investment group based upon the representations of some individuals, and that their promises weren't ever put in writing, that they kept being strung along. And so they decided to run into federal court and sue this group for, among other things, federal RICO violations. Now, I took the time to read the complaint. In full disclosure, I've encountered this group before. And there's an entire list of companies here. And what it looks like happened is that one of the main guys here, his name is Tommy Lee, he cross-pollinated a bunch of different companies. And these companies, it's not unusual, and I've done this myself, to set up layers of corporations for tax benefits, and also maybe to hold real estate, to hold investments, to manage operations. And when you hold a plant touching license, that company, I set them up as corporations, and then we move everything we can away from the plant touching company for 280E reasons, just because it's a mess. If you touch a plant, you can only write off the cost of goods sold. Anyway, so the point here is that it's not unusual to set up layers of businesses to bring money in perhaps buy or oversee real estate, manage corporations, oversee investments. Well, the claim here of these three investors that they met this guy, Tommy Lee, in 2016, apparently believed him that he knew what he was doing about cannabis. And so in 2021, came back to these investors, Mr. Lee did, and asked them for money. He's going to give them, I think, 15% in some business if they covered a percentage, and then anything over $250,000 for startup costs. They did it. There was another business opportunity. You're going to get some other portion of a business, drop some money in. And all along, they were sending money, but no one was sending them back written contracts. And let me just stop right there and tell you that if you're going to drop hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into a risky investment, and you're going to do it on a wink and a nod and a handshake, and I think your mama may have dropped you on your head a lot when you were a child. This is not advised to be doing, okay? Because this now, there's no written contracts. All we have is allegations. This is a complaint, and allegations that they induced us into dropping over $9.1 million without a written agreement, okay? And if you look up the definition of insanity in the dictionary, you're going to see this scenario. This is not advisable to do. Okay, find yourself an attorney. If you've got $1 million to invest, you've got some thousands of dollars to find a decent business attorney. Okay, so what it appears happened here is that money was taken in, and these individuals, as I said, cross-pollinated these different businesses. They were CEOs, CFOs, they were on the payrolls, money was being spent on them. They were pursuing primarily dispensary licenses around California, one cultivation facility. And it seems that in one of these licenses, someone forgot to send in the renewal application, so they lost it. Another one, the business burned to the ground and no one tried to do anything to revitalize the business and get a business operating permit. So we have what appears to be allegations of incompetence on the part of the culture group and all their different layers of businesses. But now that they've made this claim, and these are basically allegations, I'm curious to see how culture comes back because, as I said, I've dealt with these folks before, and secrecy is one of the elements that I've had to deal with them. They don't really fully disclose all that they're doing. So I'm going to be curious to see how they respond to this, because if any part of this is true, and they're looking at some serious problems. RICO is brought in. They call this an enterprise to break through all the corporate veils, to make everybody personally liable. They want constructive trust set up. They want an accounting. They want treble damages. It's unfair business practices. They threw every handful of mud they could find against the wall. So we'll see what sticks here. So, long and the short, simple lesson here: before you start throwing money at an investment, get it in writing beforehand. Okay, throwing it back at you guys. What do you think?
Well, Dale, there's so much more to this story right here. So Ben, who is the person that filed this lawsuit against Culture Cannabis, Ben is their lead investor within Culture Cannabis. Okay. Ben blew the whistle on the fraudulent actions committed by Culture. And then Green Rocket was a distribution company that was based out of Long Beach. And Green Rocket was Culture's distribution partner. And Culture racked up a $5 million debt on Green Rocket's metric. Because they were their retail distribution partner. Green Rocket subsequently was forced to close as of February 1st, 2024 due to non-payment by Culture, and Green Rocket employed 40 people who were all let go on or before February 1st. Culture Cannabis was basically using Green Rocket's credit to expand their footprint by not paying vendors and leaving Green Rocket with the bill. And Culture is a retail chain with 9 to 10 retails throughout the state, with an estimated 14 to 15 licenses in total in California.
Well,
there's some scandalous stuff going on here.
Let me just tell you, these guys are terrible. And I am just sitting here in my mind saying, what can I say without getting sued for slander or libel? When I was a director of real estate at CanDev, I dealt with this Tommy Lee guy, and he was the slimiest person that I had to interact with, such that we also ended in litigation. He was absolutely dishonest. And at one point, He called me a slanderous name because I was baiting him into a reaction while we were on calls with both of our attorneys. And I told him quite simply on that call, come say that to my face, buddy. The way in which he approached, and of course that didn't happen, right? Because everybody's tough over the phone. The way in which they go about doing business is terrible. And he introduced me to one of his prospective investors in New York for a deal that we were doing in Ohio. And because he didn't want to do the work of closing his own investor when he was going to be the tenant for CanDev. He ended up circling around CanDev, circumvented, purchased the property from the owner that CanDev had been in contract with. And like, this is nowhere near civil fraud. This is criminal. And I'm just going to say it, like, there's a RICO on this show, but there's also a RICO law. And this guy should not be allowed to give the cannabis industry a bad residual like taste, because he's absolutely full of, what's that word that Dale uses every time he's on this show?
Bovine scatology is a nice word.
Yeah.
Would you say that they're pissing up a rope, Dale?
Pissing up a rope.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can weed out, all pun intended, some of the bad actors in this industry, everybody else wins. And this guy is as slimy and as disingenuous as they come.
Well, I can guarantee you one thing, Yarrow. When they speak my name, they don't have anything nice to say, because I called him out myself. I've been on the phone with these clowns, and I just think they're, to be quite frankly, full of shit. I had a social equity client that they, in my view, did not treat well.
And it's just hilarious to me that the name is culture, because that's the opposite of what's occurring within that organization based on the interactions that I had.
Well, maybe it is appropriate that they use this. They just left out another word, which would be culture vultures.
I mean,
I guarantee you, these folks didn't lose money, Yarrow. They all got away with money in their pockets.
Yeah.
That's for damn straight.
Exactly.
Well, I hope that we have a continued purging of the people who I don't think are good unofficial ambassadors for the space. These are the types of actors that are not going to help grow the industry, in my opinion.
What were you going to say, Rico?
Call them the Vulture Club.
Oh, the Vulture Club. And on that, we're going to go to a commercial, and we are going to be right back. The Control Tower from Highly Educated has perfected the dab. Utilizing the concept of thin film evaporation, you can waste none of it and taste all of it. The micro texture of the SE pillar increases nucleation at elevated temperatures. And with the tower propelling at 2,600 RPMs, it's certainly the most efficient dab experience to date. The Control Tower from Highly Educated. Oh, stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you hit that like button. I know we'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you've not subscribed already. And all of the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website at www.highat9news.com.
I'm Jason Beck, and this is Smoky Vanilla. And if you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to get a stretch and smoke with Smoky Vanilla.
Hi, I'm Smoky Vanilla. I have my bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and I'm a sports massage therapist and stretch coach. I focus mostly on individuals that are in sport with chronic pain or injury. I love to intuitively create and customize a session based on the individual that I'm working with. We'll go over a few postural assessments, work together to create a wellness journey based on the health history, past injuries, or anything still affecting you today. And we'll get you back on your feet right away with less pain.
We're about to stretch, and then we're gonna smoke, because we're gonna get on our stretch and smoke. If you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to come on down and get a stretch and smoke with none other than Smoky Vanilla.
Yeah. Coming to the stage next. Y'all know who it is. He's got over a decade of regulated cannabis technology and data experience under his belt, everywhere from Colorado, California, and everywhere else you can think about it. But now he's representing the great purple state of Texas and bringing us some
red.
Wednesday
You're
hump
colorblind.
day. Sohum Shah.
Colorblind.
Thank you, Rico, and I'll keep saying it every week.
Yeah.
Texas is a blue state.
Just keep dreaming.
Gerrymandered into people believing that it's red.
Keep dreaming.
But today we're going to talk about some workplace safety and OSHA. So, federal OSHA officials started discussing marijuana industry worker safety, which is very interesting considering that's a federal agency and our entire industry is considered federally illegal. Two officials with the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA, spoke this week about the agency's latest guidance and priorities for protecting workers within the cannabis industry in a growing number of state legal markets. One official called for better tracking and reporting of negative health outcomes after recounting what she described as the first fatality from occupational asthma in the U.S. cannabis industry. A Massachusetts worker for the multi-state operator Trulieve who collapsed at work and died in 2022. The Tuesday webinar featured two OSHA representatives, Yasmin Daniels, an industrial hygienist with the agency, and Virginia Weaver, a doctor and medical officer. Daniels began by giving an overview of OSHA's federal and state guidelines and how to apply those to cannabis, while Weaver spoke about the 2022 asthma death and how to better prevent such incidents. The most important thing is involvement from the industry to train workers and managers to identify and report symptoms of occupational allergy, Weaver said at the online event hosted by the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, an organization that certifies safety practitioners. Workers who develop a runny nose, rhinitis, congestion, eye or throat irritation, skin rash or hives, or even more importantly, if it's already progressed to lung symptoms with cough, wheezing, or shortness of breath, they need to know who to report that to in their workplace as soon as these develop. Though cannabis is still illegal under federal law, OSHA's federal and state plans around health and safety standards are nevertheless applicable to employers engaged in commercial cannabis. That comes not only through federal guidance, but also OSHA-approved state plans in 29 jurisdictions, most of which apply to both public and private employees. Some state plans, such as those in Michigan, Oregon, and Washington state, include specific guidance and enforcement details around commercial cannabis operations. For example, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, MIOSHA, recently issued a state emphasis program that covers the growing, harvesting, and processing of the plant. They also provide guidance and are working together with the state's cannabis regulatory agency. Skip ahead a little bit. Within the industry broadly, risks to workers can vary considerably by what kind of business they work for, Daniels added. Growers might be exposed to mold and pesticides and flammable liquids, while processors might deal with solvents, combustible dust, and loud noise. Retail workers could see exposure to various chemicals as well as workplace violence. Daniel said that while the cannabis industry has several unique considerations, guidance from other sectors like the tobacco industry or even grain production provides a useful reference for some of the issues facing marijuana employees. Weaver's portion of the presentation focused on the 2022 death of Massachusetts cannabis worker Lorna McMurray, 27, who collapsed at a Trulieve cultivation facility. An OSHA investigation published the next year found her death was the result of occupational asthma that led to cardiac arrest and anoxic brain injury. Weaver, who is the lead author on that investigation, said the first major point she wanted to make is that the magnitude of exposures in the occupational setting is way more than the recreational setting. There are some who think that because a number of cannabis employees may also use the product recreationally, they could not possibly develop any work-related symptoms from it, she said, and that's not in fact the case. The exposures in the occupational setting are much greater. Weaver said that better detection protocols at workplaces, referrals to appropriate specialists, and robust research into cannabis-related risks are essential to improve health and safety in the industry. Importantly, we need research because we need to know which exposures and job titles are the highest risk for these respiratory outcomes, because you can't prevent what you aren't able to identify. There's a little bit more detail about the presentation and the investigation into the death of that worker at Trulieve, Lorna McMurray. But overall, I think it's a very positive sign that a federal worker safety authority like OSHA is starting to discuss cannabis worker safety, even though it's still considered federally legal under federal law. But with that, want to give a shout out to Marijuana Moment for covering this story. And this is Sohum Shah with High at 9 News. I'd like to pass it over to the rest of the team and see what everyone has to say.
I would like to say the coverage that we saw go down, and we were the only ones. We were the first ones to cover that Lorna McMurray story with a national footprint. And unfortunately, we saw not just the death, but the backlash that happened to the community. TrueLeaf actually just bouncing on the entire community and leaving like 30,000 jobs in limbo. And OSHA actually let them buy their way out of the settlement. Like that, it was a fine. All that OSHA could do in that situation was fine them like $38,000, and then they got that reduced to like $9,000, right? And so I wish I had more faith in government institutions like this, but just like the majority of the rest of them, I gotta say I do have a traditional Republican stance on this one, not the current Republican stance, but just get rid of.
Not a rhino Republican, you're saying then, right, Rico?
If they're not going to actually protect people, then why do they exist?
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think this OSHA thing is a total joke, and just by their actions of what with the tragedy that happened at TrueLeaf and their lack of enforcement powers of what they actually have the capability to do in relation to what they did do, it, to me, is just a joke and makes the whole system a joke and their whole agency.
So what you're saying, Jason, is that you think that they need more authority to actually be able to provide safety
I
for
said
workers.
they have enough authority. They just didn't exercise it.
Okay, so they should exercise the authority that they have, though.
In that case, yes, they should. When you have a death on the workforce, yes, that should be like a full blown investigation. All right, not just punishable by a $40,000 fine. I mean, where did that money even go? Like they need to be making sure that they're taking care of the family, all of the funeral costs, all of those types of things and whatnot. And none of that was in there, and that is just despicable.
I agree with that 100%.
It's going to be a work comp injury, and work comp's going to cover all those things. And I've had to do this. I always bring in an industrial hygienist in any of these facilities where people are going to be exposed to anything that might be a solvent, anything in the air. We want to know ahead of time, do you have any conditions that might be affected by being in this environment so that we can take steps to try to mitigate it before it gets out, or just tell you, look, if you got asthma, you got no business working in a place, you're going to be exposed to molds, mildews, dusts, and things like that. So I'm sorry, it's not discriminatory. It's just that you got a medical condition, we can't accommodate you. There are no standards in the industry. That's the problem. Every state does this differently. Every city in California or county has a different set of standards we have to apply to all of this stuff. And it's a hodgepodge right now. Generally speaking, this is pretty safe, okay, to work around it. But if you have a condition that's a set stage to go into anaphylactic shock because you get something in your lungs, you probably shouldn't be working around contaminants, okay? That's another part of this problem. And small businesses can't afford to put in $1 million worth of, hygienic equipment to clean the air so that we can protect the average person from exposure that the average person should be able to deal with. It's a mess, and it's just another part of the problems why we can't get this industry up and running, because as soon as somebody dies, everybody's butt puckers up and they run out and shut everything down, rather than let's do some logistical points here where we can test the atmosphere, what we're going to get. I mean, for God's sakes, if it's a whiff of this gets out across the property line, if you smell weed, the whole world's upset. Inside these buildings, if you're in a greenhouse and you have problems being around plant molds, I don't know what to tell you. You shouldn't be working there. Or the same thing in a processing facility. We just need a better understanding of where the safety line is and then how to monitor people. Because I represent a lot of businesses, and this is a problem for businesses. How do we deal with this without any uniform standards?
I thought they made a really good point in the article too about saying, sorry, Rico, but
go ahead.
About saying that there's this misconception especially among operators and business owners, that just because a lot of people that work in the industry consume off the clock, but they're somehow immune from any kind of negative effect. And I whatever we want to say about the effectiveness of OSHA as an agency.
Come back here.
I think that's
Who
a
are
very
you?
astute point, because I can remember even back in the day working in a dispensary leading up to 420, like this week, maybe 10 years ago.
Who are you?
And they have us in the back rolling 1,000 pre-rolled joints, and there was so
sent you
much
here?
keef and pollen and dust from all that shake
Who's Mm-hmm.
everywhere. I don't have serious allergies like that, but I could barely breathe back there. And at the
down a second.
time, nobody,
This is
like, we didn't really
awful.
think twice about it, you know? Like, they were like, yeah, on your break, go get a Zyrtec and come back and finish rolling the
There's no
joint.
cars
So,
here.
I don't know necessarily what the answer is and whether OSHA is going to be that answer, but I do like the fact that this is a conversation that's finally being had.
I think the answer is unions. Jason,
The answer is definitely not unions.
You're baiting him.
Yeah,
You're baiting
you
him.
already- you
Look,
already
we
know that
have
that's
we
not
have
the answer.
we don't need federal OSHA because we have state versions of OSHA. In California, we have Cal OSHA. And so what federal OSHA should be doing is, instead of wrapping their minds around the occupational safety considerations of industrial environments where we see the greatest number of worker fatalities across all industries, they should be pressuring the federal government to allow them to have the authority to be a part of the solve by changing the lack of legality at a federal level. And so instead of them trying to recreate some of the stuff that the states have already done, they should be pushing the other portions of the federal government to allow them to provide value across the nation. That's where they need to be putting their emphasis. And the other thing about this is, like, I'm sure there's a lot of information that we don't know. We get to come on here and armchair quarterback, and it's fun. But there's a lot of information that we don't know. I was talking to a former female CEO, and I was talking about TrueLeaf, and I was talking about the fact that, you know, the permitting process in Florida and her husband doing that time. And I think that there's a lot we don't know. I believe that this employee, to Dale's point, probably should have never been in that type of environment based on their personal health profile. It is incumbent upon employees to be honest with their employers about their health conditions, because medical conditions are confidential. And if they don't disclose it, something that could be a minor inconvenience to somebody else could be a major incident for them. And at the end of the day, OSHA's just spinning their wheels until they actually have authority.
There was a lot posted, and the shout out to Leafly for covering the story, even though they had to retract it probably for legal reasons. They went deep on that, like with her family, with her friends and everything. And apparently, like, she had no history of any respiratory illness or any respiratory issues at all. Like, prior to, I think it was like 3 weeks before her death, she started complaining about that. She was joking about it first on social media, and then she's like, "Yo, this is really bad," to the point where she took her father's N95 mask and wore that while she was working, and it really didn't help anything. And all jokes aside, yes, I was trying to bait Jason, but Jason's preoccupied over there.
Well, I mean, you are a master at that, right?
What I'm getting at is we cannot depend on government to have our backs here. And the way unions are supposed to work, I'm not saying they all work this way, but the way they're supposed to work is they're supposed to serve as a check for runaway capitalism. And right now, without federal regulation in our industry, it's going to be like, oh, should we do this? Should we do that? Can we do this? Can we do that? And if you're working at a large producer where you are going to be at risk, do it with a union job.
Unions are not a check against capitalism.
Unions are not the answer.
Are an attempt to redistribute the benefits of capitalism and to have a greater number of people at the bottom of the food chain benefit from capitalism.
All right.
It's a check against runaway capitalism, not a check against capitalism in general.
All right, fair enough.
They serve as a check for runaway capitalist leadership. Is that a better way of putting it? Right? When you have people at the top of your organization, the real pyramid scheme is American style capitalism, straight up, right? When you have people making all kinds of money and they have the power to just erase 30,000 jobs from your city's economy because they got an OSHA violation, like, oh shit, this might me being more regulation down the line. We're going to get the fuck out of this state. Like, that should never happen.
In California, the history of union involvement in the cannabis industry has been mostly focused on dispensaries. practically ignoring occupational safety considerations for farming labor staff and outdoor labor, and they have seriously missed the mark in terms of trying to penetrate the industry all the way up the supply chain, including the industrial environments of manufacturing.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, though, right? Part of the reason for that is that farm workers they don't have federal protection to unionize, right? That's any
I mean, tell that to Cesar Chavez. It didn't stop him from making great gains in California.
No, but so there's certain states protect the right for agricultural workers to unionize, but there's no federal infrastructure really to support that.
Yeah, where we're
Part of the problem here,
there's so much rhetoric against immigrants, whether they are documented or undocumented, and I believe that's the reason why we're not going to see any kind of federal protection. Because you know what, if you really do away the way these Republicans are saying they want to do away with undocumented immigrants, expect the price of absolutely everything to skyrocket that you want to eat. Period.
What were you going to say, Dale?
bro? You don't see the price of eggs?
Let's let Dale get a word in edgewise.
Well, what happens practically is that employers are required to have safety meetings and provide personal protective equipment. And if this woman came to work thinking, hey, I need to wear my dad's M95 mask, somebody on that management team should have said, holy shit, we need to have a safety meeting here about what's going on. So inside the beltway of this business, and this happens a lot, is that people aren't paying attention to legitimate complaints of workers. Because we do not know what goes on in a greenhouse. I mean, in California, ag workers, no one seems to give two shits about them in government, so they're exposed to all sorts of things. And we need to find out inside each environment, whether it's cultivation, processing, a distribution facility, a warehouse, what are the problems for workers from a hygiene standpoint, environmental hygiene. I think the feds can help that. There's a lot of other places don't even have the infrastructure we have in California to look for this. They just kind of throw their hands up and go, I don't know, what are we going to do about it? Well, you got somebody dead now. An insurance company will come forward and say, hey, before we insure you again, we need to see your standard operating procedures here for how you handle this shit. That's how it gets done in real time. But we got a dead person now that probably should never have had this problem.
Agreed. Speaking of safety meetings, Dale, we're going to be right back. Get ready for the return of the shit show to Los Angeles, returning Friday, May 3rd, 7 p.m. to midnight at a brand new venue. Comedy sets by comedians such as Demi York, Lindsay Ames, Alyssa Phillips, Chris Thayer, Josh Shakespeare, Fumi Avi, Jay Snow, Brent Weinbach, Chris Kelly, and hosted by none other than Abdullah Saeed. So head over to www.cloudmedia.partners now to get your tickets, and we'll see you there. Oh, yeah, coming up next, that's right, it's the Sebastopol sage, Mr. Yarrow Kubrin, who does cannabis, real estate, and every once in a while he does cannabis and real estate all at the same damn time. That's right, coming up next is none other than Mr. Yarrow Kubrin.
Golf clap.
Yes.
Golf clap. Hey, real quick, before I jump into my story today, I just want to clarify some of my statements yesterday when I covered Germany's refusal to allow public consumption of cannabis at Oktoberfest. My goal is always to be sharper and wit versus sharply tongued and to elicit some playful disagreement and laughter. And I was attempting to make a connection between the failed historic German policy and a current German policy that I think will fail. And I wish I had added the distinction between government policy versus the populace's will, especially when taking stabs at a country for an event that happened over 50 years ago. And I was not suggesting that there was any equivalency of scale between the Holocaust and the current German restrictions on public cannabis consumption. And what I said versus what I meant. What I said was that the Germans hadn't produced a good plume of smoke since they incinerated the Jews in crematoriums. And what I meant is that Germany had not produced a large plume of smoke, not a good plume of smoke. And so I was attempting to suggest that the last large smoke coming from that country was terrible and evil. and that now they should produce a good plume of smoke from cannabis consumption. And so yesterday I also indicated that my being Jewish didn't matter, but given my attempt to walk that fine line between hilarious and incendiary, it's worth noting that I am talking about my history, my culture, my faith, and my race. And so being Jewish doesn't mean that I have a license to say offensive things, especially during these troubled times of issues surrounding the Middle East, but I did want to clarify that I misspoke, and for that I do apologize, because it was a single misspoken word which drastically changed the meaning of my sentence. So,
is that your disclaimer?
No, that's not. There's no disclaimer on that. It's just a straight up apology for using the word good versus large, and the way in which that irrevocably changed the meaning of my presentation, and that was not intended. So no disclaimer. I'm imperfect, but I'm really good at being imperfect. So with that said, let me hop into my article today. I'm once again reporting on California. This is hot off the press this morning. Audit reveals inconsistencies in cannabis permitting process in Santa Barbara and other California counties. In a recent audit conducted by the California State Auditor, the permitting process for cannabis businesses in various areas were evaluated with several issues found. The audit reviewed 6 regions, including Santa Barbara, Monterey, Fresno, Sacramento, San Diego, South Lake Tahoe, and these areas were selected because of their geographical diversity, comparatively large and small populations, high number of state licenses versus low number, and a variety of permitting processes. Santa Barbara County specifically has the highest number of active licenses in this group and one of the lowest total sales per the report. As of 2022, the report states Santa Barbara had a total of over 2,000 active licenses, with the unincorporated county population of about 140,000, making the population per state license 67 and a total number of sales in excess of 16 million. In contrast, Monterey County had only 532 licenses, with a population just north of 100,000, garnering over 17.5 million in sales. And Sacramento had 334 licenses with 500,000 in population and earned 62 million. The findings shed light on inconsistencies and deficiencies in ensuring fairness and preventing conflicts of interest, thereby highlighting the significant control that local jurisdictions have over the regulation of cannabis businesses. The audit found that local jurisdictions did not always include several best practices in their permitting policies that help to ensure fairness and prevent conflicts of interest, abuse, and favoritism. Only 2 of the local jurisdictions used blind scoring of applications, wherein the identities of the applicants are kept from those reviewing and scoring applications, and 4 of the local jurisdictions did not require that all individuals involved in reviewing applications agree to impartiality statements. Though California voters legalized the non-medical use of cannabis, the resulting state law ensures that local jurisdictions retain significant control over the authorization and regulation of cannabis businesses within their jurisdiction. The audit makes recommendations and identifies best practices to bolster the public's confidence in the fairness and transparency of the permitting process. Blind scoring and impartiality. Out of the jurisdictions reviewed, only 2, Sacramento and South Lake Tahoe, required blind scoring of applicants, which helps prevent further preferential treatment towards certain applicants by keeping their identities hidden from evaluators. 4 of the reviewed jurisdictions, including Santa Barbara, do not require individuals involved in the reviewing application to agree to impartiality statements, which the audit states is the best practice for reducing the risk of conflicts of interest between evaluators and applicants. Santa Barbara County contracted with a third party for the initial review of applications. It included in its contract a conflict of interest clause that states that the contractor agrees that it presently has no employment or interest and shall not acquire any employment or interests that would affect their impartiality. But in addition, Santa Barbara County indicated that local jurisdiction staff who were responsible for ranking the final application and performing site inspections had discussed the importance of impartiality with the county's legal counsel, after which staff verbally affirmed their impartiality. Verbally affirmed. Therefore, the local jurisdiction had not considered further requiring the staff to sign an impartiality. Dale can tell us whether that verbal is the same as the contract when I'm done reading the article. Nevertheless, in any process that requires impartiality or that may be susceptible to bias, it is important to consider and implement safeguards, such as using impartiality statements to prevent undue influence and strengthen confidence in the integrity of the process, the audit reported. Policy and background checks. All local jurisdictions will have to have inconsistently documented whether they followed their policies and procedures when ensuring background checks. The majority of the applicants that should have received background checks in Santa Barbara did not receive them. Santa Barbara didn't require the department that oversees cannabis to document evidence that each individual had passed the background checks, resulting in its permitting of 11 of 13 applicants when they reviewed that didn't have a final verification and didn't include checking the documentation from the sheriff's office, which did do background checks. Permitting processing times. This is a big one. Although Santa Barbara County included in its ordinance a required time frame for processing applications, that jurisdiction had some of the longest application processing times among the applications, although one of the most lenient. Ordinance limit the maximum number of retail permits and limits other permit types by acreage, issued permits as long as there are no grounds for denial. Cannabis Equity Act. Under the California Cannabis Equity Act, local equity programs adopted or operated by a local jurisdiction focus on the inclusion and support of individuals and communities in the industry who are linked to populations or neighborhoods that were negatively or disproportionately impacted by cannabis criminalization. Although the California Cannabis Equity Act defined what constitutes a local equity program, it does not require that local jurisdictions conduct an equity assessment or develop an equity program, although they do receive money if they do that. That's my commentary, not the article. So they told us that Santa Barbara County doesn't currently plan to develop an equity program, and the public has not voiced a specific concern about it. So that's not true. The public, and especially within the industry, large vocal constituents have been voicing that concern. So that's not exactly accurate. The audit report highlights the significant control that local jurisdictions maintain over the regulation of cannabis businesses and the crucial need for consistency and fairness in their permitting process. While the findings indicate deficiencies across the 6 reviewed jurisdictions, they also provide an opportunity to reassess and enhance the permitting practice to align with best practices and regulatory requirements. In a written response, Santa Barbara acknowledged the value in considering some best practices as it assesses and enhances its permitting process. So I could go on, but really this article took Santa Barbara specifically to task, and Santa Barbara acknowledged the deficiencies. Acknowledging the deficiency can be a step in correcting deficiencies, but isn't the same as making those changes. This is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News, Wednesday, April 17th. I'd like to know what my other guests and panelists think.
I mean, they're not
local control.
Yeah, they're not going to take anyone's license away for this or tell everyone they have to close down because of any of this. But
I think it's all designed intentionally this way, right? It allows them to do their little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yes, this is an impartial process, and provide licenses to who they want. I would make the argument that implementing those best practices in a way that does blind scoring of applications and requires impartiality and disclosures of conflict of interest or recusal if there's a conflict of interest actually contributes more to creating an equitable landscape for licensees than creating a statutory requirement or some specific social equity program. By making the playing field more level and reducing the potential bias that could be involved with the license process, I think that is creating more accessibility. But I'm open to any counterpoints on that.
As we move closer to federal legalization, I'd like to start the movement to stop doing social equity altogether, because it's gonna be deemed unconstitutional. So why don't you just take these tax dollars and put a portion of that towards reparations?
I think it only gets deemed unconstitutional if it identifies people by immutable characteristics such as race, but not if it identifies people based on disproportionately impacted areas. But I saw Dale's eye roll there, and I'm wondering whether that was because you were winking at your sweetheart or you had a different perspective.
But here's the thing, Yarrow. Like, it was specifically, even going back to the Nixon tapes, specifically policing these neighborhoods because of race. So if it's specifically the specific damages were done because of race, and these people, because of their race, were targeted. And you can't push
the hippies and the beatniks were not a race, and they were also targeted in those tapes. So it was political dissidents, people who were against the Vietnam War. It did include racial groups.
It was the N-words, the hippies, the Jews. Yeah, he didn't say Jews, but he explicitly said that. because they were protesting war. And this is where the targeting specifically began, and it metastasized since then. So if you can go back and you can see where these people, and because of their skin color, they were targeted. These people, because of their skin color and their give them a cut of that money, man. Cut that check. That's it.
Well, the problem is the equal protection provision of the 14th Amendment. That's where all this falls apart. Okay? Because you're not allowed, as Yarrow said, immutable characteristics. We call these important groups that have been recognized, and that's race is the big one. Okay, because we all know, I was in high school when they targeted hippies and dissidents from the war for marijuana and the blacks for heroin. Well, it cross-pollinated a lot of ways now, and we're stuck with that. But we have a fault-based system. So if you have a particular problem and you think somebody else caused that problem to you, our system affords you a remedy if it's in time. So they've got to go look at those particular issues. Because going back and saying this particular group was mistreated, which it actually was, and then who's responsible for it, it creates more problems than you can even imagine, and they're based upon race, and that's where this Supreme Court is just going to shut it down. And that's a reality. I wish it wasn't, but that's where we are right now.
All right. Speaking of where we are right now, I got to get into this last story for you guys real quick for Rico. Rico, you're going to want to hear this. The marijuana party status on the line as Minnesota Supreme Court weighs a challenge. The Minnesota Supreme Court is likely to decide within a month in a legal marijuana now party will retain elevated status after arguments Tuesday that focused on its unique leadership structure and the state's laws governing party control. The DFL party sued to strip major party certification, arguing that legal marijuana now failed to meet the operational threshold for retaining the major seal it first attained in 2018. The case is being expedited because candidate filings begin in a little more than a month. The outcome matters because more parties get automatic ballot access and campaign subsidies and the ability to have poll challengers during elections. Candidates in minor parties need to gather petitions to get on ballots, and currently the three major parties are the Minnesota DFL, the Republican Party of Minnesota, and the Legal Marijuana Now Party. State law requires major parties to hold regular conventions and meet other leadership standards, and according to filings in the case, Legal Marijuana Now prides itself on having consensus-driven doobie rules, they call them in parentheses, and vests much power in the head council, or THC for short. Instead of deferring to decisions of conventional delegates, a court-appointed referee previously found that the legal standards weren't met by this agreement. Still, the Supreme Court's oral arguments made clear that justices were uncomfortable setting the bar between minor and major parties in the state in a first-of-its-kind case. Chief Justice Natalie Hudson pressed a DFL attorney why the state should be involved this deeply in party affairs, and in quotes they said, they may not be orderly in terms of what the DFL would like to see or what anybody else would like to see, but Hudson said early in the 70-minute hearing, but do they have to be, he says. Justice Paul Thiessen posed a similar stirring of questions to lawyers throughout the arguments, although Thiessen said it could not help state officials get a clearer idea of who to listen to. When it comes to party affairs, he added, why does the state have to dictate which of those entities have to be listened to? David Toll, the attorney for the DFL, responded, just as there are tiered leadership requirements, there are tiered benefits that come with that status. Zoll said later in the hearing that major parties are rightfully held to a higher standard, and in quotes, they can organize themselves however they want to, he said, but if they want the benefits that come with major party status, they have to satisfy the statutory requirements. During his turn at lectern, Legal Marijuana Now attorney Eric Cardial disputed the arrangement fell short. In quotes, he says, my client read the statutes and Constitution, thought they did what they had to do, and would do more if they had to do it, he said, adding that the organizational decision was about efficiency, not defiance. The two marijuana-related parties won major status back in 2018 after at least one of their candidates won at least 5% of the vote in a statewide race, and grassroots legalized cannabis fell down a rung after failing to meet that threshold in following elections. Legal marijuana now has held on, although it hasn't had much success as of late. But candidates for the party have vexed Democrats in some close contests since 2020 because they've managed more than the margin of victory for Republicans over Democrats. DFL leaders also say the ballot line has been used for political mischief. In the campaign finance report filed on Tuesday, the Legal Marijuana Now party revealed its bank balance at this stage in the election year is $830. Major party candidates can qualify for state campaign subsidies amassed through an income tax checkoff, and two justices have recused themselves in the case. Carl Procanci and Margaret Church. The reasons they aren't required to specify, meaning the ultimate call will come down to the remaining five. Jan Woodruff, an attorney for the Secretary of State's office, asked justices for a swift decision, and in quotes, if decided by May 15th, it will provide all parties to the election, candidates and the secretary and the other election administrators throughout the state enough time to proceed with knowledge of what their requirements are, Woodruff said. The 2-week candidate filing period for most state and federal offices on Minnesota's ballot opens on May 21st, although parties have until late August to submit their nominees in the presidential race. And in quotes, we'll try to be as prompt as possible, Chief Justice Hudson said in his adjourning of the hearing. Well. Can't wait to hear. And Rico, I hope you are still here to hear what you have to say about this. Oh, he's gone. He is gone.
Well, I think that it involves two First Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court already said that money you pay for political parties is freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. Okay? And there's also freedom of association here. These are fundamental federal rights. And I'd like to see what tests they're going to apply to these requirements, because it's got to be more than the rational basis. I'm not sure it's a strict scrutiny standard, but an intermediate scrutiny. It's got to be, carefully crafted to meet an important governmental interest before you interfere in someone's right to be some political party. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see how they address that issue. Mm-hmm. That's kind of geeky lawyer shit.
With it. I think they should dissolve the party just on the basis of those two awful puns, the Doobie Rules and the health
THC,
council or whatever the fuck it was called.
THC, the head council.
The head council, yeah. Mm-hmm. Just on those two alone, dissolve the party. I'm against it. Abolish it.
Look at this. I can't believe you said that. That's so funny. That is so. Any thoughts on this, Yarrow?
$800 in their account, right?
$830.
They can't even buy a round of beer for people.
No. They definitely couldn't. They definitely couldn't host a member to dinner. That's for sure. Any thoughts on this, Yarrow? Before we wrap up.
No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I do have one question for the legal marijuana party. What is the end game here after federal legalization? Like, what's the purpose of the party? This is why I think that single issue political parties are kind of dumb.
No sense. Makes no sense. Single issue political parties are dead on arrival because we are not single issue human beings. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to vote. I don't care what the single issue is. Single issue political parties is a failed model. Hard stop.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And on that, thank you all for joining us for High at 9 News every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big thank you to our audience and supporters for tuning in daily and listening to the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Thank you to all of our sponsors, Catalyst, a few others, and everybody, Cloud Media Partners, everyone. Adam over there holding it down on vacation in lovely New York. And thank you all for joining us. This has been High at 9 News. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show.